So beyond just benefiting us by reducing Chinese influence, it also helps to reduce Russian influence. So Russia in 2014, I think, started to create the Eurasian Economic Zone, which is kind of, to me, sounds like the restarting of the Soviet Union. Now they did this as a counter to the European Union, and basically what it is Russia has free trade agreements with Eastern European countries. So right now it's Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Belarus, and parts of Moldova, the Transnistria region, which is a disputed region in Moldova that still has allegiance to the Soviet Union, which is it's weird, but not all of Moldova. But anyway, so they're trying to create their own like EU basically, which is kind of dangerous because you don't want them to have economic power and you don't want them to have too much influence over other countries because we all know what Russia does when it has too much influence. So if you reduce the trade that Mongolia has with President Putin in Russia, then it reduces the power of the Eurasian Economic Zone, which is better for American and Western European influences. So there's a lot of economic availability in Mongolia, which have to kind of be creative with it. So there's a lot of influence that the U.S. can have on Mongolia's defense as well as international security. So the U.S. can bolster the Mongolian army through training and cooperation. Obviously, the Mongolian army is small, right? We're not expecting them to be able to take on Russia or China in a fight. That's just ridiculous. They don't have the population to do that. But the Mongolian army can be trained or continue to be trained. Mongolia sends a lot of soldiers to participate in the United Nations through their peacekeepers. Like I said, Mongolians fought and died in Iraq and in Afghanistan for the United States, so that's great. And then just to continue to foster cooperation and shared experiences, there's a it's a policy called socialization, and it helps to bring countries together. The more and more familiar one country gets with another, then the better those relations could be. The U.S. can benefit from working in Mongolia. We can set up listening and observation posts in Mongolia to keep an eye on China and Russia. So these would be little, we have like satellites in the air to do that, but sometimes you want people on the ground. Now it's kind of risky, right? Because you don't want to have be too provocative against China or Russia, because obviously they're not going to enjoy that. But with Chinese aggression in East Asia, especially in the territorial waters, South China Seas, the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, everywhere that China's going, building their artificial islands, their aggression is really unchecked, and Russia obviously as well, between the invasion of the South Ossetia region in Georgia and the Crimean invasion. So this is an area where the U.S. doesn't have a lot of influence, right? We have Japan over there, Japan and the Philippines, and those are our allies, but they can't really counter Chinese aggression, and they haven't been able to. So we've never really had a strong presence in East Asia. So I think by working with Mongolia to step our game up there, that was bad. It would really benefit U.S. security interests. So we can project power into East Asia and reduce Chinese influence, especially after a lot of the world's kind of suspicious of China after the global pandemic that we're going through. And then finally, I talk about like soft power influences in Mongolia and how the U.S. can use our soft power to have Mongolia ally closer with us. So it can strengthen Mongolian democracy and reduce corruption. Like we said before, it's kind of a corrupt state. There's a lot of issues in politics and stuff. Not a lot of Mongolians are college educated because they are a poorer nation. There's only a few schools in Mongolia. So a lot of the college educated people are the ones that go into business leadership positions and political and governmental leadership positions, and that's good, but it kind of creates a monopoly. So there's a lot of corruption and kind of like a revolving door of corrupt politics in Mongolia. So more interaction with U.S. Leadership and democracy can help strengthen them. In my paper, I talked about how there's been a lot of like congressmen and senators and such that have gone to Mongolia and had like cross-cultural competency talks, and like we've observed a lot of Mongolian parliament meetings, and they've observed a lot of our House and Senate meetings and helped to strengthen democracy. We're seeing throughout the world the rise of realpolitik, the the revival of realpolitik and power politics and hard power and stuff. And that's not what we want to see, right? Democracies around the world are under attack. Democracy is weaker than it's ever been, you can argue. So as we increase the use of soft power, we can kind of hold back power politics and the negative impacts that they can have on societies. This can be accomplished through things like youth exchange programs to develop cross-cultural competencies. We send, some of our students over there, and Mongolians send students to America, and it helps just to create greater appreciation for each other's cultures and such. So, what does the future look like for Mongolia and the United States? I said that I truly believe there's a lot of opportunities for growth and cooperation. There's ways through political, economic, social avenues that we can ally closer together, be better together. We can encourage Mongolians to reduce corruption. Mongolians can teach us a lot about how to protect the natural environment. Mongolians are so intertwined with the environment, and they have such a deep respect and reverence for it. And the U.S., we kind of lack that because we champion progress of economics and such. So I think that they can teach us a lot and such. We can reduce Chinese and Russian influence because we don't need them to corrupt Mongolia and create a huge unbroken swath of land that is just completely against the Washington consensus and how we believe that the world should be run. And I think that the U.S. really needs to seek further cooperation to treat its allies better. We focus a lot on certain countries and we kind of ignore other ones. And I know, international diplomacy is hard, especially with recent cuts to the State Department and the rise of realpolitik and traditional diplomacy. It just seems like there's no point to it anymore. But I don't think so. There's lots of countries that we can work better with and kind of reaffirm our allegiance to them, and we can make the world a little bit safer. So I really enjoyed this project. I've always had this odd fascination with Mongolia ever since I learned about, Genghis Khan and his conquests. And it's kind of like a forgotten about country, but it's important. And Mongolia really shaped the world. There would never have been a renaissance if it wasn't for Mongolians who had established the Silk Road, and which brought back, all the lost texts from ancient Rome. And then when the Crusaders went through Eastern Europe towards the Middle East, the texts were there, and it led to the birth of the European Renaissance. And Mongolians established the first tax system and the first postal code. So that's interesting, and they really shaped our world. And it'd be interesting if we could better ally with them. So thank you for listening to my presentation.